having been in the events business, you probably can't go ever into one the way you used to before you were in the events business, right?
You
So
can't,
stuff like
can't.
jumps out at you and you're like, oh my God, or that was great, or like so like it changes your view, right?
Mhm.
So I'm sure you see this certain some stuff that's great, but you also probably see some stuff where you're like, it's a head scratcher for you, like, wow, I can't believe they.
Registration snafus, man. Registrations that are just backed up for days, and you're looking at it, and it's one person sitting there with a printer, and you're like, wait a minute, you're printing out every single badge individually. You didn't have any pre-made stock. You didn't have any of this to make it easier using this kind of system. Nah, nah. All right, cool. We're gonna be here for an hour, but registrations have been blunders. But then, like you see things too that like will just stand out as like, oh man, I really have to do that. I mean, I know that the headshots that you do through Good Picks and everything else like that. It is really like seeing one of those things and going, oh my God, how did I not know I needed this before? The other ones like I've seen like just lounges that have been more elaborate to not be lounges, but like playground spaces for adults and had a bunch of like weird and wacky things for everybody to do. It's those things that like stick out and you remember.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Super excited to talk to Joe Kowalsky about the resurgence of events. He's been in the events business for a while, most recently with CloserStill Media, running, I think, at least the vet event, I think, is the big
That's
one.
correct. That's correct. That's me.
So yeah, the obviously events went through a bit of a hiccup with the pandemic, but they seem to be sort of back pretty much full force. Now, are they back, in your opinion, the same strength as before, or do you feel like there's still some lag there?
Oh no, I mean I think it's honestly back in full force even more than it was before because even the people that were cooped up and hadn't gone before were now looking for something to do and everyone starts finding their little communities and it becomes a regular thing. So I know I've seen a lot of record numbers coming out of shows, our shows looking at really strong growth across the board. So it's really nice to see, especially after going through that whole gauntlet of just terrible times. So it's been nice.
Cool, cool. Well, there's a lot of different events, and I'd love for those folks who are planning events or executing events or trying to think about how to do events better. One of the first things that people have to think about is like who's paying the freight for the event, right? Because you've got everything from the sponsors covering pretty much everything, where
Mhm.
basically they're kicking in the money and attendance is free or close to free. Then you've got like things that look much more like conferences, maybe much more on the content side. And often in those cases, sponsors make up a much less percentage of overall revenue. So when you've been involved in sort of planning of events and setting, the dynamics there, what's the best way to sort of think that through as to whether or not you're going to sort of be more towards my revenue comes from the sponsors, exhibitors, maybe it's a little bit more like a trade show, a little less like a conference,
Mhm.
versus a conference that has a few sponsors, but maybe not even a trade show floor.
No, that's honestly a great question. And it all comes down to, I think, really knowing who your target demographic is. Who are you creating this event for? In a space where I've worked before, I've done the big Photo Plus expos and WPPI Expo and conference where it is really driven more by the sponsor. You're making big booth displays, you're making spectacles to attract people into your brand. So in that kind of experience, it can tilt more revenue heavy that way because the priority is getting those bodies down for your sponsors. But when you're working in, I mean, AI is a hot topic right now. Yes, there's shows that are going to have a trade show floor component, but a lot of those brands are a higher echelon brand. They don't feel like they want to have a booth space. They want to be able to talk on a level of just, this is the education about our product. This is the education about the industry itself. And when you have that, it can work really well and you can charge whatever you really think the market you're catering to demands. That's really, it's off to the races. But I personally believe it's having that nice little sweet spot. No matter what, I really am of the belief you want an attendee paying for some kind of ticket, whether it's a $25 fee or the 100 and change or the $1,000 ticket. It qualifies that attendee and makes them more likely to show up to your event and makes them more invested in what you're doing on, and will have them engage in more of your messaging. So it really is having that healthy mix, but vendors are really still going to be the lifeblood of what you have going on, because they're the ones talking to the people you're bringing down to see.
Sure. Well, one other thing, obviously, that you can do with vendors is you can have the vendors assist in the marketing because they want to be able to get face to face with folks. And often, they end up having either a certain amount of comp tickets or a certain amount of discounted tickets. And I'd love to hear how you think through that dynamic as to, you know, do those sponsors end up getting the best coupons or the best deals, or do you also tier pricing with regards to like the early bird versus the last minute attendee? Those
So
pricing issues could end up being pretty important.
it can, and I've had it be where you end up running and gunning, just trying to get people through the door, and all of a sudden your best deal that happened 8 months ago is now your current deal, and your attendees that bought early are confused and possibly upset with you a little bit, and it can turn into a nightmare. But I think it really is having a firm set deadline schedule that you're selling against, and always making sure that you have the best deal. I always feel like I'm the show provider. I'm the one talking to you regularly. I'm the one providing content to you. I'm always going to be the one giving you the best opportunity to buy something from me. But your sponsors are a huge, huge piece in that. Your speakers too, like they can be monumental for you in that. So it's really, there's a lot of different programs. It's having a consistent discount across the board for those guys. Maybe you have a few folks that you have dedicated discounts with for internal memberships or for other just little random partnerships you've created. And so you're trying to add it as more of a benefit. But for our shows coming up, for instance, we're doing more of all of our exhibitors are going to receive a standard discount code of 15 to 20%. And then hospital chains that we really want those attendees to come down, veterinary events. We really want those people to come down to our show. We're going to offer all the hospital chains just 5% extra than that amount for their staff, just so that the staff members can come in. But even with all those rate discounts, none of them are really they'll match maybe my best offer, but they'll never be a better offer than I am.
Right. Another thing, obviously, you see in the events business is you've got some standalone events that sort of have their CRM or whatever you want to call it, their way of communicating with their attendees. Um, Sometimes those are publishers as well, right? And they're in the content creation business. Sometimes they're associations, and then sometimes they're sort of standalone, and they don't necessarily create much event beyond that, slight pre and slight post window. And do you feel that changes the dynamics as well? Because if you're a standalone event, you can have like publishing partners or association partners, and so your partner page looks a little bit different, right? Because you're like bringing those people in. But if you're a publisher, probably not going to bring in another publisher as your partner.
Yes. And I mean, when I worked Photo World, I had just that. It was having a 2 magazine business that was alongside with digital and other pieces. And it was shifting how we would provide messaging and sponsorship visibility to that online market if you were doing the events. And it really became a way of telling that year-round story. So it's always really nice. Right now, I'm not in that position. I am with just my content partners, and they're fantastic. They're amazing. This is a great way to go. But it provides its own set of challenges when you essentially you don't necessarily have subject matter experts on your team in the content portion of what you're looking at. It can put you behind the 8 ball a little bit at the time. So it really is maintaining a strong relationship with those partners. It's having clear parameters and seeing how the content they're generating for their sites and what they're doing can be multi-purposed on your site or can be used for article traffic, and really still providing your community and your audience the value of that year-round content without you necessarily having to be the one that discovered it. I really just need to be the channel where they can find things, and I need to make sure that I'm putting those opportunities in front of them. So it becomes a little bit less of being a thought leader and being more of a thought communicator. And so that has to be the priority.
Cool. I would imagine either when you are a publisher and you have your internal editorial subject matter experts, or if you're a standalone event, but you tie into the publishers that have editors and subject matter experts, you occasionally come into the dynamic where the person is like super smart in the category, but maybe
Mhm.
doesn't have a stage presence. And how does, as a show producer who wants to be tactful in maybe media training being required, or maybe this isn't the right person to be the moderator for this channel, this track, right? Have you ever had to sort of deal with that political issue?
I have a little bit from time to time, and it's more. I find when those situations do happen, it's more about the speaker being in their own head and honestly being able to have a genuine conversation with them. Don't get in their head and bring it up to them 5 minutes before they're about to go up on stage. That's not the play. That's a horrible play. As a theater major, never do that to somebody. But if you're checking in with your speakers, if you're providing a know before you go, have some stage tips, have some things that even like have it where someone can reach out to you and you send out that communication is looking for stage tips, looking for ways to improve your performance, want to sit down with us, be there as a support system for your speakers, because then that word about that is also going to get around to the speaker community, be like, whoa, these guys took care of me. And those people, just because they might seem a little hesitant on stage at the start, one doesn't mean they're not going to be a good speaker. Two doesn't mean their network's not gigantic. And three doesn't mean that they don't know everything about the subject you need them to talk about. So it's more being that consultative help and guide. And that's why it's also super important to get your content set early. If you're setting your content 2 months before an event, you're not going to see these things. You're not going to notice it. But you have 5, 6 months, you're able to build up that rapport. You're able to check in, you're able to look at other video of the speakers to be like, let me just do my due diligence. Because we know how it is. You're going to book speakers from time to time. You're going to be run and gun. Great. We found somebody finally. They agreed. Awesome. Sign them. We'll worry about the other part later. Remember to worry about it.
Right, right. One other thing I've noticed a shift in, and maybe it's my imagination, maybe it isn't, but sort of pre-pandemic, if conferences or trade shows with a conference component had speakers, there was no way you'd get any element of that content post-event if you weren't attending. That
Mm-hmm.
still exists in some situations, but I start to see like at least, folks with the ticket IDs who are in some kind of a system can get to it because that's
Mm-hmm.
great because you don't end up with this, oh, I wish I could be at all three of the tracks at the same time problem, right?
Yeah.
And so people could feel like they got more out of their ticket price, but there's also just the fact that getting that content out there, not firewalled,
Mm-hmm.
is a benefit to the speaker. It's a benefit, especially if there was a sponsor tied to a specific track and their logo is in the background or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've noticed that the sort of content wants to be free model seems to be sort of taking over because they want to create more longevity for the event, pre and post, as opposed to sort of have it in a silo. How should folks think that through?
I mean, again, I think that comes down to first and foremost communication with your speaker, just setting the terms and clearly outlining how you plan to use the content from their class, especially if you're bringing in someone to be a keynote speaker that you know is of a higher level and their content is extremely valuable. That's their livelihood. That's like the thing I think we kind of start forgetting sometimes is just like this is their livelihood. They make money off of these classes. Someone may take the one class that they bring to my event to 5 other events across the country, across the world, and make their money off that class. So being upfront, being in communication, and then never. I still think that there should be a monetary piece for us. We do a vet show academy, and so essentially classes that are recorded from our shows are put up on this academy and can be accessed for a fee by people. Um, I still think those speakers should be compensated. That's kind of sort of my piece, but when it comes down to wanting to make bite-sized social media content, when you want to make 2 to 5 minute videos that are teasers, that's honestly providing you more opportunities to work with your speaker. It's providing you more opportunities to create editorial content too, where they can take you through a top 5 of what they just taught and recap for the people that don't want to watch the video. It opens up a lot, but you also have to be willing to budget for that and don't expect it for free. if you are expecting it for free, what you're doing for your speakers better be above and beyond what they're seeing from other events, because that's where I think the willingness comes from. People know content is just going to keep churning and churning and churning. There's always going to be fresh content. Sure, take what I just did. I need to make new anyway. But that's not everyone's situation.
That's a great point. It also reminds me that you sort of got different content types. A lot of shows will do like a pre-show workshop, right? That's actually much more classroom style, educational, hands-on, and that type of content I don't see typically sort of leaking out, right? Whereas if there's like then the main stage or whatever, you're going to get the occasional pearl of wisdom. It's maybe a little bit more entertaining, charismatic. It's a different form of content. Yeah, you'll walk away saying, well, that was interesting or that was cool, but you're not going to be like, oh, this is going to transform my business. It was worth $40,000, which you might get in a pre-show workshop, right? And so I think that brings to bear, how you think about structurally show planning, right? Do you really want to separate those out? And then are there pricing changes? Like everybody gets the workshop, but oh no, the workshop's an extra, $999, right? And so it allows you to even create the trade show only, access if the people aren't interested. And you want to do it 3 tiers: got your workshop, your show content, and then your trade show only content. And how do you got to keep everybody happy, right? Because trade show floor people, they still want them qualified, but they don't want to chase away the people who can't afford the $499, right? To get the content.
No, and that's the whole thing of it. Like when you look at why events are still good, they provide you that hands-on kind of experience, and that's why those classes haven't translated online. You need that intimate nature. You need that highly qualified individual that's willing to invest in everything, and so that's where you'll see a lot of events like, yes, in pre-cons, but like hosted buyer style events at times. It'll be more about that content. It can be in intimate groups, but then it's just making those meeting opportunities and that one-on-one time for the sponsor, because it's all about that kind of connection. So it can be done and pushed through almost every event format type. It can be your most expensive piece of the ticket, like you were saying, and it's going to be the most qualified part of your audience. So just make sure when you're charging sponsorship on it that you're charging that commensurate value. Don't let it just sit there as like another thing. That's your thing. No one else has that. So really jump in on that.
Yeah, another thing that I'd love to get your opinion, and this may be something that gets discussed more above your pay grade, but you've been in the room, right?
Maybe
is the idea that with some conferences in particular, you get these piggyback folks, right? Sometimes it's just a party. And these are people who didn't put a dime in to your P&L, right? But they're going to take advantage of that. Everybody that is in the city, right? Especially
yes, they are
all these boondoggly destination type events. It happens in the ad industry for
everywhere.
The Cannes Lions event, right? Is like famous for that. And you could sort of make both arguments, right? You could say, well, actually, the fact that there's all this other great outside this show, parties and contents and dinners, actually enhances the fact that it's a must-go destination, right, event. And then, it increases the odds that you're going to sell the ticket, because if you have great content, people still will want to go and engage in that content. But then you could be, those MFers, they're taking advantage of the fact that we're doing all the work. We're putting all the energy in, and we didn't get a dime from them. So I could take either side of that, right, and actually come up with a pretty good argument.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, like, if you've been in those meetings, like, are you cursing those folks or sort of saying, well, it's sort of like, the fact that car dealerships are clustered together on the same street, or the McDonald's and the Burger King are always opposite each other. It's like, it just adds velocity to the whole thing.
So you're 100% right. It could be seen from both sides. I've been in the room when it's been the negative thing. I've heard a boss say on the phone, listen, we can go to war with you or against you. I don't want to go against you though. And the guy took it totally wrong. It was like, you want to go to war with me? And it turned into they didn't do our show for the next 4 years I was with them. But still did their own little side event at another place across the street out of our venue.
Right.
So it can have a negative effect. It can definitely be something everyone is then talking about, like, oh, did you see what these guys did? So definitely be tactful and don't use phrases like that on the phone. I think that it works. I think as long as it's not something that's habitually competing with a big mainstay of your event, you're pretty solid. But as long as you're in the know on it, it could be fine. And for me personally, I just want to make sure I reach out to those people and give them an opportunity to sponsor without a booth. That's
Mm.
where I think we get hung up a lot on the event still. Like it went away with COVID, and then all of a sudden it was like we have to start forcing you back into a floor. And I get it. We're glorified real estate agents at times. I am the space I have. I totally get it. But also with that, it really has to be, hey, you're throwing this party every year. I know you don't do a thing on my floor, but what if we could do a targeted marketing campaign to the people you want at your party to the show? Where would you see the value in that? And then I'll put you branding wise on as a show sponsor. And I get to say that I have XYZ brand down at my show. If you go in with hostility and that this is my ground and everything else like that, you're just going to cause problems for yourself. I mean, there's a time and place for it, but don't go in that way to start. Go in and see how else you can maybe make a couple bucks off of it while also adding to your overall show experience, like you're saying, because now it becomes, oh man, yeah, we go out to Vegas and there's these 5 parties I got to hit and I got to make sure that I'm in bed by 1 because we got that keynote on this one. And it becomes a bigger experience. So I'm with you. I think it benefits the show. I think it's on the salesperson and everyone else with the show to make sure that they're approaching it in a way that first tries to encourage collaboration. But at that point, start calling your venues and telling everybody you need first right of refusal on every single space if you haven't already, and make sure you're approving the people that are using the spaces. If they're not doing that, they got to go get a hotel room, which is going to be more difficult to get to based on key scanning and everything else. Their attendee experience will be more difficult without you. Or they got to go across the street, and it's going to be a bigger problem there because who's to know if the venue has space and anything else like that. So
Right. Those are excellent points. And it brings up the other element that is of particular interest to me, like with Giving Forward, we invented Good Picks, a charity headshot,
love it.
experience. And so a lot of times things like that are not on a prospectus, right? And in general, you mentioned that, if you're in the, you want to have a non-confrontational arrangement with somebody that certain sponsorship may not be on the prospectus or a certain activation may not be on the prospectus. Should the exhibitors and sponsors be more bold in sort of asking for things that aren't on the prospectus? Because you guys have your platinum, gold, silver, then you got all your different lanyards, and you got your lunches. So and the prospectus is a great menu with a lot of a la carte items and a lot of package bundles. But what if there's something that's not on the menu, right? And you're at a diner, you can order anything. It doesn't matter if it's on the menu, right? So should the sponsors and exhibitors sort of feel bold to sort of say, hey, what about this? Or what would this cost?
I think the exhibitors that are doing these kinds of things already and are willing to engage with you are going to bring it up. If you're having a conversation with them, they're already bringing it up for the most part. The person that's not bringing it up is trying to pull a fast one on you. And, oh, yeah, I'm not going to sponsor here. I can save a couple bucks here. And I can do this on my own. And, yeah, if they don't find out about it until it's too late, then, forgiveness, permission, and it'll be a whole thing there. But I've always thrown into every single sponsorship menu we have custom sponsorships. You have an idea, bring it to the table. So it is about us as the salesperson bringing it up. I also end every single one of my sales pitches because I'm a wackadoo crazy person. I try to come up with 2 just stupid ideas that I think are random but tie to your company. Last year for the vet shows, we built a dog agility course, but I didn't bring in any dogs. I just had them wear dog onesies, all my attendees, and they ran through it for a chance to win prizes. So you can do wacky things and demonstrate that you can have that creativity. It's just don't sit there in your box in the room. And when they start talking to you about creative sponsorships going, well, first we have to look at this 20 by 30 footprint, and that's going to cost you this for the booth. And now you can do whatever you want. I'm out of the conversation. Be a part of it. Make it a show activation. Make it something that you are saying, I'm invested in the success of it. Much harder said than done if you're trying to come up with it mid-budget cycle. But start budgeting for these things and have them listed as sponsored items. If they're not going to happen, take them off of your budget line. It's your cut money. If people aren't supporting it, it can go away or be redistributed to the new idea that they are demanding. The whole thing is that you have to at least force that conversation so you know what they want. Otherwise, you're just going to sit there pitching in the wind.
Yeah, that's great. I guess being nimble on both sides is an advantage, but also being realistic, and that you can't come in last minute and expect, the show to bend over backwards because they're still trying to get all the ducks in a row, for everything that is on the prospectus.
Exactly. Because it just becomes a fulfillment gauntlet. And so do I need to bring in additional temp help to support what you're doing? Do we need Freeman to craft these big outrageous displays? And do we want to review 4 or 5 different iterations of it before we actually decide what's getting built? It really does become a full year process, especially when you're working with it through a partner that's treating it like honestly, a sponsor that's treating it like a partnership. Not everyone comes in like that. They think it should be, here's the money, make it happen, and I'll see you on show site. And there's definitely things like that: lanyards, badges, signage, 100%. But when you're looking at hey, I want to build a wacky program that's going to engage people and make them come through my thing to the tune of 50% of your audience, that takes work. That's building a class track. That's figuring out exactly what your audience wants to do. That's a lot of survey data. That's knowing your market and making sure you're not, making them dress up in dog costumes when they're doctors. And obviously not everyone wants to dress up in a dog costume. So it's really learning, and it's something you're going to learn as you go too. I just started in the vet shows last year, learned a whole lot about my audience that I didn't know before. And it was all based off of assumptions I was just making about people. It's something you really have to get in and know your audience before you start making these decisions.
For sure. The what are some fails that you see commonly? Because you probably go to events that you're not producing, and
Yes.
having been in the events business, you probably can't go ever into one the way you used to before you were in the events business, right?
You
So
can't,
stuff like
can't.
jumps out at you, and you're like, "Oh my God," or "That was great," or like it changes your view, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure you see some stuff that's great, but you also probably see some stuff where you're like, it's a head scratcher for you. Like, wow, I can't believe they.
Registration snafus, man. Registrations that are just backed up for days, and you're looking at it, and it's one person sitting there with a printer, and you're like, wait a minute. You're printing out every single badge individually. You didn't have any pre-made stock. You didn't have any of this to make it easier using this kind of system. Nah. All right, cool. We're going to be here for an hour. But registrations have been blunders. But then, like, you see things too that will just stand out as like, oh man, I really have to do that. I mean, I know that the headshots that you do through Good Picks and everything else like that. It is really like seeing one of those things and going, oh my God, how did I not know I needed this before? The other ones, like I've seen like just lounges that have been more elaborate to not be lounges, but like playground spaces for adults, and had a bunch of like weird and wacky things for everybody to do. It's those things that like stick out and you remember and you try and duplicate and steal, because let's be real, you steal good ideas, do it. There's a reason why it's a good idea. But yeah, everyone's going to have a rough part of their show. Nothing about a show goes 100% right. Anyone that's done a wedding to a birthday party knows something always goes wrong. It's the same with conferences and expos. Something always goes wrong. It's just how much can you smile through the pain and then really realize it was a good time all around.
It's so funny because I've worn all the hats, right, over the years, and one particular pet peeve that I have is sort of the silliest, really, and seems like it'd be really easy to fix. And I don't know where you are in the vet show, for example,
Yeah.
but like, I hate the fact that it's a single-sided badge, right? Because some kind of
Double-sided,
weird
man.
gravity, like, make sure that it's always backwards. And then you've got the people that make it backwards on purpose because it's not their badge or they want to be anonymous. And so, but from a networking perspective, from an exhibitor perspective, from an attendee, like it's exasperating. Like, I have no idea who this person is.
No, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. The amount of people that I always just have to go like, can you flip that? Can you just flip it for me real quick? And it's, hi, I'm Joe. Oh, I'm just staring at the back of your badge. Yeah, because I'm always like, I always look for the badge. I'm always trying to learn the person's name before I do it, especially if I met them before and I'm horrible at remembering names.
Right.
It's just the worst in the world where you're like, damn, my safety valve is gone. All right, Who are you? What do you want?
Right.
So I'm right there with you. That one sucks. That one's
Yeah.
terrible.
And
But
I don't know what the relative cost is to have a badge printing system that
well,
does
it
two-sided.
has nothing to do with that. We can make a two-sided badge tomorrow. It's just usually if it's sold as sponsorship, that sponsor can purchase out the ad space on the back of it. And so
Ah,
that becomes a whole thing where now do I want to lose revenue so we can go double-sided badges? No. I'm too much of a stickler. Go sell it, guys. Go sell it.
right,
But
right. Okay. Well,
if
that
you
sort
could
of
if you could
explains it.
sell it, if you
Yeah.
could sell it, sell it. If it ain't bolted to the ground, sell it. Water coolers. I'm trying to get bathroom attendants sponsored and sold to wear little branded shirts and everything like that for people selling pee products. I'm try and look for the weird little things that you can tie together for people, and you'll come up with wacky and weird sponsorships and things that'll stand out and hopefully not totally drive you crazy in the process.
Right. Yeah, I've noticed increasingly, not just with Good Picks where we have a QR code, for registration purposes, is that they're sort of back at the events to some extent replacing the printed material that used to get shipped out to events because it used to
Mhm.
be pretty horrible actually. The bigger the trade show floor, the heavier your bag got. And
Yep.
the reality was like maybe 20% of it made its way home. Like at the time you were like, oh, I'll grab this.
Hmm.
But it killed the tree was already dead before they brought it there. But the reality is
Yeah.
it probably wasn't an efficient way of distributing the information. Maybe, if I'm going to read it on the way home, I'll grab it and read it on the plane or whatever. So I still think there's some role for that, but I do see that sort of QR code activations are starting to be a green alternative for, the printed material.
No, for sure. And I mean, the more of it we could see happen, the better. I mean, this past year we eliminated carpet from our floor. We tried getting more digital signage involved. We cut down from show dailies to a single show guide. I mean, environmental friendliness has to be something that we think of, especially in the events industry, with how much waste we really produce. We're a wasteful industry. But to the other, like just huge benefits of things like QR codes, though, and all that other piece. I mean, I see a lot of people now use it to tie, like we have SwapCard as our event app. I see a lot of people tie QR codes to a link in the event app so people will be sent directly to their products. They'll put up search engines based on job listings and things like that with QR codes on the show floor and put it in big display areas. We do it with our clinical briefings or proceedings. That's what they're called. The proceedings documents that we provide to all of our attendees, though, it used to be a big book like that thick every attendee would get. Now it's a QR code, download the PDF. You want to print it at home and bring it here. I don't want to have to be a part of that. And it's something that's good to see. And I think that we'll see as more of those technologies become available and the next new thing beyond the QR code, because QR codes can just be ugly at times. So it's when someone figures out how to make that just a beautiful thing that can be done, that'll be the next transition. Uh, but uh, but yeah, sorry, I'm rambling now, but yes, I'm right there with you on it.
Final question.
Hit me.
Everyone thought that the future was going to be hybrid, that when face-to-face came back, that some element of sort of this hybrid idea would occur. But I
Mhm.
haven't really seen that. It's really turned into like, okay, there's an online only thing, whatever that is, and then
Mhm.
there's an in-person only thing. But I I haven't yet seen hybrid work in the way that it was sort of envisioned. Like you'll have an almost identical user experience if you're in the comfort of your living room. You're just not, you know.
No
But is
one.
there some form of hybrid that could end up working, or is it really going to be like there's online events and there's offline events?
I mean, I think we're Mark Zuckerberg in it a little bit right now, and everyone's like, Quest is going to be the next thing, and VR technology goggles, and all right. And I'm all for it. I love gaming. I love goofing around. It's a good time, but I don't see it being right now. Right now, the thing that is going to immediately immerse itself into a hybrid event. No one's going that way with the hybrid event. It's just now you can watch my classes online. There you go. And check out these virtual booths that are just product listings. If I wanted to send people to a website, I'll send it to the one their company has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on maintaining and getting things done on a daily basis, not the 5-minute profile that got put up. That's great for 3 days when you're trying to set a meeting on site with somebody. That's your whole experience, though. Are you going to check into that? And that's where I think I keep coming up with all of the hybrid piece or the digital online events, like whatever we want to call it. It's just, do you want to go to that, or do you have to go to that? Is someone like, hey, I bought you a ticket to this thing. Now you have to go because it's part of your training for the year, and you have to know this. Versus, I picked this event down in Miami, out in LA, in New York City. I went and chilled with my friends for 4 days in classes and went to items and did this, and I learned these things. And now I can also hit up the other 25 people I met that learned the same thing and ask them questions about it if I don't understand something. None of that can be replicated within the chat box. I know everyone's like, Gen Z's doing it. It very well may be, but the tech for me, as little old millennial Joe, I don't think it's there. And I don't think that until it's there, we should be wasting our time with it. Like, you want to have your classes online? Great. Just stop calling yourself a hybrid event. You're just showing recordings of classes after the fact. Come on, get over yourself. So that's where I get held up. If you didn't tell, that one's got a little bit of a sticking point with me. I hate hybrid events so much.
Well, I just have yet to see one that really is hybrid, right? It just sort of isn't.
It's not.
And so, a bunch of venture capital money flew into the category, platforms got built, and then as soon as people could get out and shake hands again, they were like, F this, like, that's not the same.
And now they're all mobile app providers, essentially. Like, essentially everyone that was going to be this next big virtual piece. And this isn't me dogging any of those programs. I work on a bunch of them. I've used a bunch of them. They're fantastic. But they're great alongside your live event. They're great there to support your live event, not to create, in my opinion, an experience alone in itself. Right. For me to go, I'm going to sign up for this thing and pay money for it. That's the other thing. Are you going to give it away for free? So now what's the value for the person that was on the fence coming to your event? Now what's the value if you're giving it away for free online just so you can get any Tom, Dick, and Harry through the door? I mean, know your audience.
Right.
Have your goals. Have your integrity. And hybrid events are done.
Cool, Joe. Well, a lot of great wisdom there for folks who are in the thick of it, planning events or as sponsors or exhibitors at events. I think a lot of meat for them to think through as they
I hope
reallocate their budgets.
And I hope, reallocate, get everything to live events. Nah, I mean, I'm not an idiot. I understand. A good, healthy marketing mix is strong, but always go and meet the people you can meet. Take advantage of every single live event opportunity you can afford. And, just don't go in thinking you have to operate within the box. Always be willing to ask questions and see what opportunities are there for yourself. Whether you're producing the event or going out and participating in one, you don't know. You don't ask, you don't get. Absolutely. You don't ask, you don't get.
Perfect. Well, words of wisdom that go way beyond the event business for sure. Thanks so much for joining me on the podcast, Joe.
Anytime, Kevin. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Be well, all right?
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.